as a former teacher, I'm here to sort of try to provide a series of lessons, but it's the worst feeling in the world when kids show up in your class and you start to teach something and they say, Mr. Shriver, we just learned that in the class before. That's what's about to happen, so I'm going to do a lot of improvising, and those of you who are teachers know what I mean. I hope you'll be sympathetic to me as we go forward. But I also want to point out that both First Lady Cox and Governor Cox alluded to a quality of a teacher that I want to try to underscore right at the outset. Governor, you said that your teachers saw something in you that you didn't see. And I just want to invite us to take a second on that point, because I don't think you meant they saw something in your hair color or in your skin color or in your eyes or in your arms or legs or torso. I think what you meant is they saw something within you. They saw some part of you that was inside you. They saw you from, if I can say this, the inside out. And if you try to capture the entirety of the field of social and emotional learning, and for better or for worse, whether you like the term or the idea or not, we'll get into that a little bit in a minute, all we've been trying to do in this field, and in the largely and multiple Venn diagrams that surround social and emotional learning, we'll talk about that a little bit, all we've been trying to do is give our teachers the best evidence-based strategies for seeing children from the inside out so that they can see themselves as being safe and strong and capable of optimizing their learning. So if there were a slogan for today, I would say, you've given it to us, seeing from the inside out. And I hope that all of you know that whenever we do this, when we are at our best as educators, we're changing lives, whether we realize it or not. I don't know how many of your teachers are here today, Governor, but they don't have to be here today for us to be able to convey the message back to them, all of the thousands of teachers who aren't here, that when we do that, we change the course of a life. We live, it's almost obvious to say it, in a divided country. But I want to ask you as educators to think with me for a second here, for maybe 20 or 30 minutes maybe even, as to whether or not this is really true. And maybe the first assignment, the first anticipatory set of this lesson design is for you to make a note, either a mental note or a written note, or if you're on your phones, you can put it in notes. The answer to the question, is my school divided or not? Is my community divided or not? Is my county divided or not? Is my state divided or not? Is my country divided? I just gave you 5 questions. Make a mental note. And we're going to try to explore the relevance of this question, not just for our politics and not just for our media, but for our children and for us. My first answer to the question is, as the governor alluded to, you have the first piece of evidence right here. The issue of our time might be whether we're divided or not, but the answer we often miss. And you have it here in your First Lady. I just want to say that, yes, the governor mentioned a lot of first spouses have projects. Maybe all of them have projects. A lot of them are told, avoid controversy. Avoid getting too much in the middle of it. Don't get into issues that could entangle the governor in his or her role. Make sure you stay out of clickbait. Avoid conflict on social media. Not so in this state. You have a First Lady who takes on real issues of substance without necessarily all the baggage of politics, but with a voice and a passion and a commitment to actually making a difference, despite the noise and the voices all around her. I have 2 favorites on the list, although they're all fantastic. You can see in the upper right-hand corner, I don't know, she keeps letting the governor sneak into the pictures, but you can see there that she's expanded the work of Special Olympics Unified Champion Schools in this state. I'll say just a little bit more about that in a minute, but it's an extraordinary gift to the children in this state who have special needs, and an even more extraordinary gift to children who don't have special needs, who learn to see the best in themselves by seeing the gift in someone that they had ignored in the past. So I just want to thank the First Lady. We were together. We were together in Orlando. For those of you who follow the Special Olympics movement, you'll know that we had our USA, our first big event just a few weeks ago in Orlando, Florida. Abby Cox got on the plane, flew to Florida, was there for most of the event, cheering on Utah's athletes. You see her there in the upper left-hand corner with Hannah Joy Atkinson, one of our global messengers. You see her there with Team Utah. You see her there again with the governor here locally at home. This is a person who doesn't, as she says so brilliantly in this Show Up campaign, just doesn't pretend to care. She shows up. And I'm just super grateful to her. I don't know where she's gone. She's left the room perhaps for this, because she knew there would be too many accolades here. But I just want to say how grateful I am to count myself as her fan and as her board member. So the governor mentioned the pictures that came from NASA yesterday. This photograph came in the end of the 1960s. It was taken by Michael Collins. And for those of you old enough to remember, Michael Collins was the astronaut, the one of 3 astronauts who went on the first lunar mission but didn't go down in the lunar landing module. He stayed in the capsule rotating around the moon. And this is his photograph of the module that was coming back from the surface of the moon. And he liked to say that in this photograph, all known life is in the frame, except for one person. One human not in the frame. Every other known life form is in the frame. And he took this photograph and he talked about it for the rest of his life. And here's the words he said about it. He said, the thing that really surprised me was that the Earth, where we are right now, gang, what we're sitting on, walking around on, the Earth projected an air of fragility. And why, I don't know. I don't know to this day, he said. We lost him just a short time ago. I had a feeling it's tiny, it's shiny, it's beautiful, it's home. And it's fragile. So I want to ask you at the start here to just maybe draw that word fragile in a little bit. You can draw it into your chest or into your torso or into the rest of your body. You can draw it into your heart. Fragile. In some ways, he's looking at us in this photograph and saying, we're all fragile, right? Our children are fragile. The earth is fragile. Our relationships are fragile. And what else comes to mind for you? Is there someone in your life right now who is fragile? Are you feeling a little fragile? It's a word we don't often use, but as educators, at some level, when those kids come through the door in September or late August, there's some part of us that no matter what age they are, elementary, middle, high, special ed, regular ed, sports, arts, academic subjects, we know they're fragile. And what do we do with fragile things? We care for them. We treat them gently. We wrap them carefully. We mark the box if we're sending someone. Fragile. What's the next words that come below it? Handle with care. And what are we doing with all of this fragility, with all of this beauty? Think of these words: tiny, shiny, beautiful, home. Our home, our country. We found ourselves somehow so far from the compassion and care that we know is necessary for us to flourish. And so I offer you this image in part as contrast to the images we get, because here's the images we get. We're a divided country. This data on this slide is all dated. It's 3 years old, believe it or not. Division is 90% of us think it's a serious problem. 80% of us think we're divided. Democrats think we're divided. Republicans think we're divided. Clinton voters, Trump voters, urban, suburban, rural. We all say the same thing. We're worn out. We're tired. Animosity. It doesn't do good for human flourishing and thriving. In the face of all we know about human development, we treat each other terribly so often. And what happens when you treat each other badly? Only 16%, this number has gone down recently, think there are countries working well. 1 in 4 of us. So that would mean that one whole column of this room, just imagine this whole part of the room, all of you, if you were a representative sample, compared to the rest of the room, would have ended a relationship in your families or amongst your friends because of the division and divisiveness and corrosion in the country. Almost half of us want our states to leave the Union. We've given up on each other, and it's damaging us. So people say, well, what's going on? Isn't it all about the internet and things like this? So I want to make a claim here. There is something that Arthur Brooks calls the outrage industrial complex. And there's a lot of words on this slide. You don't have to read them all, but let's be clear. People are actively selling you anger and hostility for profit. This, my friends, is a business. And it's not a good one. Some people have sold lots of things. There's a lot of things that are legal in this country, and they should be legal. But that doesn't make them good. That doesn't make them healthy. That doesn't make them admirable. Arthur Brooks says at the bottom, America has become addicted to political contempt. Why? Look at the middle paragraph. The goal was to systematically pry families apart and set group against group. All right? So those of you who I didn't ask you to raise your hand, if you've ended a relationship in your family and you think it's because of Uncle George, or you think it's because of that crazy niece, or you think it's because of your husband or your wife or the division, just remember, someone actively sought that breakup. They tried to addict you to a narrative in the news that was almost like, listen to the words, almost like a religious contract in which the idea wasn't to make you mad, it was to keep you mad. Sustain the anger and hostility. And the words, you've heard them all. Those people, you've heard it in your school board meetings. Those people, they hate our values. Those teachers, those parents, those elected representatives, those people on that side of the town, they're the problem. Those people that come from out of town, those people that come from other countries, they're ruining everything. Those people who believe and who go to church, they're the problem. They look down on us. It's their fault. This language, my colleague Tom Roschert and Tammy Pfeiffer who are here, we've looked at this, and it's the same on both sides. People use the exact same sentence structure. If you were a teacher, you'd say, look at this, sentence structure A, sentence structure B. They're talking about completely different people, and they're using the exact same sentence structure. What's going on? Have we lost our capacity to discern what's true from what's simply hostility? So why do I talk about this in this context? Because the toll on teachers, as you've heard already, is extraordinarily negative. Gallup just released its data the other day, about 2 weeks ago. Teachers now have the highest burnout rate of all professions in the country. Finance, firefighters, law enforcement, lawyers, doctors. Teachers have the highest burnout rate. Why? Because they're living in the center of these divisive debates every day, at least in part. The burnout gap is increasing. Teachers are burning out at higher and higher rates. Other professions leveling out. Almost half of us feel like we're always, Sid said, but you get to the end of the year and you feel exhausted. I don't know how many of you get to the end of the first week of school. I mean, if there are any first-year teachers in here, for those of you that remember, if you get to the first day of school and you think to yourself, oh my God, it's only Monday? I am exhausted. You come home, if you have anybody at home, they're like, what's wrong with you? It's like, you won't believe how tiring. So our profession is hard enough when things are good and healthy surrounding us. It's impossible when we're surrounded by acrimony. And it's not just, of course, our teachers. The same thing is true of our kids. I'm sorry to say, I could do 50 slides on the mental health of our children. The vast majority of us are deeply concerned about the mental health of our children. 60% of our parents more saying that they're extremely or very worried about the mental health of their children. Suicide, sadly, in this state and in other states, and Governor Cox has given us an extraordinarily beautiful and heartbreaking and challenging story to bring this to life. We don't need statistics in the face of his beautiful sharing this morning, is an enormously dangerous source of tension and fear for our children. Mental health emergencies, the list goes on and on. Now, here's a slide you might not have seen. This comes from a group called Learning Heroes. Now, I don't know if you can see it in the back there, but I want you to look at how parents answer the question about top worries. Governor, you might want to put hands over your eyes, and the rest of you who are legislators, put hands over your eyes. The number one worry of parents. Reading skills. How many people would have guessed reading skills? Look where it is. Can you see it? Maybe you have to look all the way to the bottom. The number one worry of parents is politics in their kids' schools. What's next? Happiness, well-being, stress, anxiety, and violence. So here's my conclusion. Guess what? They're related. Numbers 1 and numbers 2 through 4 are related. The fact that we have chosen as a country, our political and media forces have chosen to demonize education, to use it, not to change the outcomes in schools, but to supercharge political agendas of the tear-down people. I'm sorry to say, I mean to pigeonhole people, but those people are using this agenda to further an agenda of contempt, right? And as a result, parents say, I'm worried about the stress and anxiety and happiness of my child. Now, I don't have correlational studies. My colleague Mark Brackett from Yale is here, and he's going to say, you can't say they're related, Tim. You don't have correlational studies. You haven't done the matching. I'm not a statistics person, but I can say common sense tells me that the more we see divisive forces coming in to attack our schools and our educators and our kids and our families, the less likely we are to have children who feel, or parents or teachers who feel, that they can flourish. So you can say, yeah. But the premise here, I'm going to go back to the first question, are we divided or not? What can we do about this? Because we're so divided, right? Okay, let's just test the assumption. If you said in school, if you're a social studies teacher, I want you to explore a question, I'm going to give you an open-ended question, explore it. Now you go do the research. Find your primary sources, find your secondary sources, look in the back of the room for here's textbooks, or here's secondary reading, or go to the library. Let's test the assumption. Are we divided or not? Okay, so here's pre-pandemic data on social and emotional learning. Now, I'm guessing if this is a representative sample, there's about 10 or 15% of you who don't like, just have decided this is not, I don't like this, 10, 15, maybe it's more. I don't like the idea of social and emotional. I don't like the words. I don't like what it means. So here's the actual data. 92% of businesses say that social and emotional skills are more important than technical skills. Not 62, not 42, which I would have been happy with, honestly. 92. Are we divided? Almost 90% of parents say that these skills will help their kids navigate. 99%, and this is, the principal data is from Castle, but the employer data is from the Wall Street Journal, right? So this is not left or right. Rand Corporation data, 90% of teachers agreed that SEL would improve academic achievement. This is pre-pandemic. So if you gave this assignment to your kids and said, are we divided on these issues or not? Now, do your introductory paragraph, do your body paragraphs, your explanatory paragraphs, and at the conclusion, write your conclusion using the data. The student might say, well, I'm not satisfied with the data, Mr. Shriver. Okay, let's look at some more data. Let's look at the data during and after the pandemic. It's almost unchanged. 80+% of educators say social emotional learning improves student outcomes. The vast majority of our districts are trying to implement something resembling a social and emotional learning program, and over 80% of our teachers say that integrating SEL into the core curriculum has become more important, not less important, than it was before the pandemic. So you could say, well, wait a minute now, that's all fine and well, that's mostly educators. We've got to deal with the parents, and parents are very divided, right? Okay, let's see. Here's the data on parents. 80% of parents at pre-pandemic levels believe families and schools should work together to promote SEL. Go down the list. 82% have said it's become more important since the pandemic. 86% of parents, where there isn't a social and emotional learning program, want more. So you can try to formulate your concluding paragraph in your 6th or your 2nd grade writing assignment, or your 9th or your 12th grade writing assignment on this. But I think it's very difficult at the end of looking at this data to conclude that we're divided on these issues. Now you say, but wait a minute. I tell you what we're really divided on. It's equity, right? That worry, when you bring that up, let's look at the data. Again, same source. Equity is necessary for a student's success. 81% of teachers, 83% of principals, 76%. Now, those of you in elected office, if you get 76%, Governor, have you ever gotten 76% of the vote? No, but he's doing okay. Without 76% is an enormous number, right? Now, look at the next one, defining equity. Here, I make it big for you. Equity, which means every student receives the support to thrive based on their individual needs. This is where the numbers go off the charts. Now, how are other people I mean, you know, the definitional stuff and the ambiguity is being driven by people who are trying to create conflict for conflict's sake. If you ask most people to answer this question, do you believe schools should be places where every student receives the support to thrive based on their individual needs, you're going to get vast, vast majorities who agree. So my conclusion from all this is that there's a starving majority in this country. And it's us. I think teachers are probably, as a representative sample go, one of the most powerful networks that represent this, what I call the starving majority. Starving for relief from the hostility and the contempt of the larger culture, and ready to marshal the energy necessary to build something different. Now you could say, but okay, that's all fine and well, but it's overwhelming. What can we do? So I go to my role model, one of my many role models. This is a picture of the late, great Archbishop of South Africa, Desmond Tutu. And I was fortunate to be in a hall like this when he was speaking about 15 years ago, and someone in the audience asked him this question, Archbishop, isn't it clear that evil is more powerful than good? Isn't it clear? And this is what's lying beneath the surface for a lot of us. Isn't it clear we can't oppose these forces? And for those of you in politics and the media, I've heard this from you. It's just so difficult. The dividers, the contempt, the hatred is so hard to oppose. And lurking beneath the surface is that sense in which it's too much. It's too powerful. I can't stop it. There's nothing I can do. This is the question that the Archbishop was asked. His answer was no. Evil is not more powerful than good. And then he had a little twinkle in his eye and he says, but it's better organized. So my plea, my invitation, my hope, my willingness to support and be a part of all these conversations in whatever role I can play is to say that the future of our children, the future of our profession, and I would dare say the future of our country is resting on the question of whether or not we can organize a counterforce to the hostility and divisiveness and contempt that is being brought to us by businesses threatening us and benefiting from the contempt. Can we mount a powerful enough force to oppose it? Now, I have a small offer. It's called the field of social and emotional learning. Again, please, don't worry about the language for a second. I just want you to see this chart as educators so that you can see that what we have tried to do in this chart, and there are many others, by the way, so I'm not trying to, this is not the only one. We get nothing from selling this. There's no branding. There's no licensing. There's no career advancement from this. This is just an attempt to offer teachers and schools a rubric around which to think about how can we ensure that our teachers have the chance to see within that student what he or she doesn't see within himself or herself. And the science tells us that it breaks down roughly these ways. There are a set of skills we call self-awareness and self-management. There are a set of skills we call social awareness and relationship skills. And then there's another set of skills we call responsible decision-making. This forms, for those of you in curriculum design, the scope of the social and emotional. It's not the sequence, the scope. The scope of skills, attitudes, and values that we can teach, and we can teach teachers to teach in order to strengthen the resilience and the capacity to oppose and confront divisiveness, hostility, despair, and even potential suicide, and be stronger in the face of all those things. So, enough talk about it. We're going to do a couple quick lessons. I want to bring you first quite an advanced lesson that covers the top two tiers, top two slices of the pie, self-awareness and self-management. Why? Because I think it's one of the most important. So this lesson might feel intimidating, but I want you to try it. So this is a lesson called, Can You Turtle? Now, this might make you uncomfortable because you're maybe not used to it. But the steps in learning how to turtle are 4 steps. This comes from the PATHS program. Maybe some of you teach the PATHS curriculum. I hope so. But maybe some of you have taught turtling, and you could come up and teach it much better than I could. So I just want you to take a moment to think of a moment when you felt angry or stress. Just stress. Anybody feel any stress this week so far? Oh, 4 people have stress this week? Okay, come on. All these people in the back are not paying attention. I know how you do this. Just imagine a time when you felt stress, and I want you to do step 2 as you think of this moment. Step 2 is you stop. And if there's one thing I offer that you take with you from this presentation, it's step 2 of the turtle. When you feel stress, stop. Now, you ready? Come on now. One shoulder over the other shoulder. One hand on one shoulder, one hand on the other. And when you feel stress and you stop, I want you to drop down into your shell and take 3 deep breaths. And after those 3 deep breaths, you have the option for a little positive self-talk. I'm okay. I can manage this. I can come up with a solution. I can relax. I can take a minute. I can ask Mr. Arthur if I can go outside in the hall for a minute. I can handle this. And then you're able to come out of your shell. Now, I don't know what you want to call that, but most parents, I learned this skill, a slight variation on this, when I was in the classroom. I was about my 5th year in education, and I learned this in a teacher training session. And I can tell you where I was sitting when I learned it. I wasn't a kid. I wasn't a second grader. I wasn't, theoretically, at least an adult, by age at least an adult, not by maturity. But it changed the full trajectory of my career. Just to have the capacity to self-regulate and be aware of my feelings. So let's look at one of the PhD level examples of someone who has become self-aware enough to be able to monitor and know themselves in a way that is the result of this kind of skill. Let's look at this quickly. Oh.
Are you smart?
Yeah.
Are you strong?
Yeah.
Are you brave?
Yeah.
Are you pretty?
Yeah.
Are you kind?
Not really.
That is genius. How many people can do that? How many people can do that? How many people can go through the list and be self-aware enough? And did you even see she took her pause? She took her deep breath. And you could almost watch. I don't know how to answer this. So these are very fundamental skills, these self-regulation skills. Let's go on. Let's keep going. So here's a second set of skills. This is more in the social awareness and relationship skills category. This is a set of lessons often taught in the 9th grade or 10th grade level, so a little bit older kids, but not necessarily any more complicated a skill. It's called How Do You Disagree Without Being Disagreeable? Our best political leaders know how to do this. Our best political leaders know how to do this, and they also know that it's the way to get things done. But many of us don't know how to do it. Many teachers don't. Many parents don't. So here's your homework assignment. We're not going to go through this, all 5 strategies, because there's lessons for all of these. There's active listening lessons. Anybody taught active listening in here? Maybe some of you have taught some of these lessons. Good. So there's active listening in here. There's self-regulation when you're listening to other people. But I just want you to take home one homework assignment. We'll start it right now, and then you take it with you. I want you to think of a conflict you're in right now, someone with whom you disagree deeply. It could be somebody you know. It could be somebody on the air. It could be somebody on television. It could be somebody on Fox News or MSNBC. It doesn't anybody. You really disagree deeply with them. And I want you just to take 10 seconds now and presume positive intent. See if you can find in that person the positive, and by this definition here, positive means doesn't hurt yourself and doesn't hurt others, the intent of that person not to hurt themselves or hurt others. I'm not asking you to agree with them. I'm asking you to presume positive intent. We've found in some of this work that one step alone changes the dynamic of the conflict. It doesn't ask you to abandon your principles. See what comes at step 4? Sometimes people say, are you asking me to give up my principles? No, not at all. Are you asking me to compromise my principles? No. We're just trying to create a culture in which that beautiful earth we saw at the beginning, that fragile earth, all that fragile life, can somehow find its way to resolve the points of tension in a way that doesn't damage the other person and actually produces good outcomes. So that's your second assignment. You get a little snippet of a short version of this being taught in a classroom lesson called The Conflict Crew, and you'll see that I get to be a little bit the student on this one. Hold on. Let's go. So, Becca, a lot of Americans, not just parents, not just kids, are dealing right now with lots of conflict. You created something you were telling me about called the Conflict Crew, where you got second graders. Now, we're talking kids who are 8 years old, to be helpful to other kids in reducing conflict.
tell us a little bit about the conflict crew and how you taught it and what you actually taught the kids.
Sure. So what I did was I picked out 3 students in my second grade class who had good leadership qualities, great communication skills, and I told them, I have this idea of a group that can work together with other students in our class to help solve conflict with each other. And they really were so into it and so about it. We started discussing what types of questions they would need to ask if they were with 2 students that were having a conflict with each other. So they came up with 3 questions that they would ask. But the first question was, what happened? They really wanted to know, what happened in the situation with the conflict so that we can hear both sides of the story. The second question was, how did that make you feel? Because in my class, we really want to make sure that we're talking about our feelings and not glazing over that. That's something that's super important because even as adults, we tend to bottle that up and we don't talk about it enough. Whenever students are in conflict and they hear how what they did made someone else feel, it helps build that empathy for them because maybe they felt that way before too. So the third question was, what do we need to do to fix this? Because whenever we create a conflict or create an issue, we really want to restore that relationship. And so it kind of built as the year went on. Maybe a student had a conflict in my room or whenever they were in art class or PE. And I would just say, would you like to have a conflict crew with that person later? And they would say yes. And then I would let the conflict crew, take over. It's really powerful for the children that I'm teaching that they're able to start learning those skills at a young age. And I just am trying to picture them in the future and they have strong emotional intelligence. I'm just really excited to see where our world will be then.
You've not only focused kids on how to learn the skills to resolve conflict, but you've created a culture where you feel seen and valued, where your names are known, where your personal stories are understood, and even in a virtual world where you can feel connected to one another. If I just think of that recipe, feeling valued, feeling known, seen, understood, and when conflict arises, being able to trust that there's a great second grader who's going to help me through it, I think the country would be a lot better off. Just to say to viewers, to listeners, there are ways to learn these skills. Becca's teaching them to second graders. We can all learn them. And maybe it's time we tried.
So that's Becca Walton from teaching second graders. Yeah. So I'm going to go quickly. I know I'm running short on time. I want to offer a third rubric, a third set of skills here when we think about the gap in our culture: self-awareness, relationship skills. This is a set of skills that we are just refining that we call the inclusive mindset. One of the great challenges of especially K-12, but of life, is how do we manage with children, with adults who feel left out and excluded. In the world of special needs children, certainly in the world of Special Olympics, it is the primary metaphor for everything we do. Those who have been excluded, we call it an inclusion revolution. How do we create an inclusion revolution? So these skills, we've distilled, and we're designing curriculum just now, actually, to actually help children develop. You've heard of growth mindsets, right? What about an inclusive mindset? What are the skills and qualities that could contribute to being able to help young people and adults learn these? A signature skill of the inclusive mindset is this one: to look in a room and ask one question. Abby, you said this in your remarks. Who's missing? Who's missing? When you look at the gym, when you walk down the hall, when you go to the lunchroom, when you're in the class, the includer asks, who's missing? Who's not? At the birthday party, the most frequent thing I hear from parents of children who have children with Down syndrome is that they've never been invited to a birthday party. Never. So when you have your birthday, for our kids, you have our birthday parties, ask yourself this question. If you have an inclusive mindset, it will come naturally to you. Who's missing? Doesn't mean you have to have everybody. Just ask yourself the question, and immediately the skill becomes what I would call a decision-making vector that allows you to potentially see the possibility of being an includer. Now, of course, we're divided in the country, as we've talked about earlier, on all these things, and we're most divided on whether schools should have an academic mission or address these larger humanware issues. But actually, the truth is, gang, we're not. And here's data. If you need it, we'd be happy to provide it to you. My colleague Mark Brackett may talk about a more recent meta-analysis, but this is an analysis of over 200 social and emotional learning interventions. Just look at the fourth bullet point under the green arrow. When done well, evidence-based interventions with these kinds of skills brought into the whole school culture and climate produce gains not just in behavior, not just in reducing suspensions and so on, not just in happiness and these kinds of things, but also in academic achievement, in standardized test scores. So when people say to you it's an either or, it's not. No brain ever came to school without a body. It's just never happened. No analytic intelligence ever came without a heart. It's just never happened. So the idea that we shouldn't be training each other to see what children can't see themselves, to see them, to help them see themselves and others, is ridiculous. Well, we've got conflicts about funding. No, we don't. This is Utah parents. What do they want to prioritize with COVID-era funds? Social and emotional wellness. Okay, so all of these divisions, I dare say, are myths. I don't have time. Wish I had time to get into this, but I just want to highlight this one top line here. The number one concern that aligns teachers and parents is that it is essential right now, the currency of our time, in my view. The currency of this realm is trust. And until and unless we focus on our capacity to strengthen the trust between us across the apparent divides, we will not be able to solve any of our more pressing problems. So you'll hear lots of this language. Some people like emotional intelligence. My colleague Mark Brackett loves this term. Some people like values education. We like values education. Some people will say, no. Cleveland calls the work they do in the Cleveland Public Schools humanware. Okay? Many people want to prevent bullying, which is the isolation, the exclusion, the name-calling, the contempt that comes from a lack of self-awareness and relationship skills. Bullying prevention. Oh, we can do that. That's fine. Suicide prevention. Again, I won't go into it because we got a master class on it. Substance abuse prevention. Many school districts, we need a substance abuse prevention program. That's clear. We need that. We have obviously a substance abuse problem in the country. Character education. Some of these terms lean a little right. Some of them lean a little left. Personally, I could care less. Our interest in a room like this is children and families. That's it. The language doesn't matter. The language doesn't matter. First Lady Cox's term, educator wellness. The language doesn't matter. The skills, the values, the attitudes, using the best evidence we have to align the interests of parents and teachers around these issues. That does matter. That's a matter of life and death for individual children and for our country. So here's my conclusion from my 6th grade essay. Any 6th grade teachers, I'm considering this my 6th grade concluding paragraph. When it comes to supporting the emotional strength and safety of our children, parents and teachers are not divided. When it comes to social and emotional learning and academics, parents and teachers are not divided. And when it comes to teaching social and emotional learning and promoting equity, parents and teachers are not divided. We want all of these things. And the fact that a small percentage of people, remember, 75% of Americans have never been on Twitter. 75%. And we're responding to the 1% of the people on Twitter who are the most hostile. As though we're divided. It's a lie. It's just not true, my friends. So I think this is our moment. We build, we don't tear apart. Other people tear apart. That's not our job. That's not what we do. That's not why we went into this profession. We teach through relationships. We know this, not through hostility. Nobody ever taught a child by screaming and yelling and berating them and bullying them. It's just not what we do. We develop skills. We don't harp on weaknesses. We promote shared meaning, not despair, not giving up, not hopelessness. We educate through shared purpose, not by isolation, not by despair, not by loneliness, not by ending our connection. We're experts. This room is experts at social, cultural, and interpersonal belonging. Show me a room of better talent in that field. There isn't one. So this is our moment. Our kids need us. Our families want us to respond to the call. Our country needs us. So I just say, why not? Why not every teacher in Utah trained? Fill in the blank. If you don't like social emotional learning, I'm sorry I keep saying that, but I just know that sometimes is a red flag for people. Fill in the blank. Why not a curriculum and a strategy supported by teachers in every district? A lot of superintendents here. Get the parents involved. It doesn't have to be us versus them. Build a process where we can create a systemic response to the needs of our children. And as Abby said at the beginning, why not, in times of pain and division, a commitment to empathy? I mean, it doesn't have to be that complicated. I'll leave you with one short video. It comes from our work in Special Olympics in promoting these skills and gifts in schools. It comes from a high school in Rhode Island, and I'm sure it could and will someday be coming from many, many high schools throughout Utah because of First Lady Cox's initiative and because of so many of you. Take a look, listen to the language if you can, and then we'll wrap it up.
Penguin? Patriots. Patriots, there we go. Yeah. Jason loves sports. Yeah, Jay loves the Patriots. Who do you like? Gronk? Say it. Gronk. Everyone's curious, like, living with a person with, like, disabilities, like, how daily life is, and I say, I don't know, just it's normal.
You good? All right. Have a good day. All right? Be a good boy, right?
I am.
I know you are.
It's like a normal brother relationship. We fight a lot, and we also have great moments together. It's great. It's life.
You know, I think that when you talk about Evan and Jay, you talk about, you know, they're really one person here. It's not Evan, it's not Jay, it's Evan and Jay.
Jay's just like a big ball of joy.
A student who typically you wouldn't hear much communication from, but when you do hear it from him, you feel it. He greets you in the morning when you walk in. He wants to get up and make sure everybody's smiling and having a good time. So he may go by you, tap you on the shoulder, he may make a silly face.
Who's on your basketball team?
Evan.
Evan. Who's he again? My brother?
I'm a brother.
My brother.
Evan and Jay are instrumental in our inclusion movement. Evan Hallberg alone is the dream for a teacher.
Programs like TOPS, Special Olympics, and most recently Unified Sports have provided a foundation for individuals of all abilities to express themselves and succeed in society.
You don't really know until you're up there, and that your heart's pounding knowing that you have to like give this 1.5-page long speech in front of everyone.
I know that when I graduate from high school, I will miss the times I've spent with my brother. Even the little things, like car rides at school, with the radio booming and him dancing in the backseat.
I started like sobbing a little bit, and then Jay put his arm around me, and then after that I knew I was kind of like done. But I remember that I'm talking in front of the entire school and I'm on TV, so I had to keep going. Making a contribution to a huge movement is the biggest thing anyone can really do. It feels humbling.
For this is why I choose to include. Thank you.
Through sports like Unified, I can trust everyone to protect my brother because they know that he's no different than anyone else. Brings like no greater joy. Yeah.
So, my friends, thank you. I leave you with my great gratitude for welcoming me, First Lady Cox and the Governor, all of you, for the work you do, with enormous respect, indeed, I would say awe, for the strength you've shown this last year and in your careers. And a reminder that what you're doing is very much what Evan and Jay were talking about there. You know, the language never ceases to stop me. That he says at the end, I can trust everyone to protect my brother. He's no different. That's your work. That's our joy. We can look out in our classrooms, in the halls, and believe that we've done our part to create a culture where we can trust each other, protect each other in this small, fragile planet of ours, and to do so in a way that maximizes and optimizes the goodness and beauty of each and every child and each and every family that comes to be a part of our schools. Thank you very much for your time, and have a great conference.